Hello everyone and welcome to our expert talk in the course of PDA Group's focus series on sales enablement. This is an interactive talk, so please use the Q&A function to submit your question. I am here with Whitney Sieck, Senior Director of Enablement at Outreach and an accomplished revenue enablement leader. Whitney, it's a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you so much, Britta. I'm really excited to talk to you about a topic that I'm so passionate about.
Thank you for joining. So Whitney, before we jump into our core topic of today, discovery, I would really love to give you the stage to introduce yourself to our audience, to share who you are, what you did in order to become who you are today, and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as a sales leader who quickly realized that I loved training my sales teams and watching them apply something that they learned in a training that helped them achieve the results that they wanted to. Gosh, that was the part of the job that didn't feel like work. And it felt so rewarding. So as soon as I figured out that I could bottle that feeling and make a career of it, I relentlessly pursued a path in enablement. And so, as you mentioned, I'm in my very first week as Senior Director of Enablement at Outreach, which means I support our sales and customer success teams and report directly to the Chief Revenue Officer.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this opportunity because Outreach is focused on sales engagement and automation that really helps to drive rep productivity and go-to-market teams. And I don't know, I strapped myself to a rocket ship with this one because they've been named the #1 sales tool by G2 Crowd, and the announcement with Salesforce investing in them happened the day that I signed my offer. So it's growing fast. Yeah.
Wow, congratulations, especially now in those days where we hear so many negative stories. It's wonderful that you were able to get this super job. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, my favorite question before we even get further, and I ask all my guests, is what is sales enablement for you, Whitney? How do you define it? And I'm sure with your length of experience, you can give us a super deep definition of that.
Yeah, it's such a good question because it's different at every organization. And as an industry, I don't feel like we've really landed on a consistent, clear definition. And so I think at the highest level for me, enablement is about maximizing human potential at scale. And it's an investment in up-leveling go-to-market teams. And that can manifest itself in a variety of ways. So when I explain it to like my grandparents, I say that it's as simple as I help people get better at their jobs. And when I'm talking to executives, it's very different. I focus on the return on investment of enablement because executives are used to speaking in corporate metrics like customer lifetime value or CLTV. And so I actually map it to our internal customer, being the go-to-market teams, and use the equivalent of ELTV or employee lifetime value. And so this allows us to quantify our ability to ramp quicker, our ability to improve conversion rates, and to grow and retain top talent, because in a startup environment, this is really instrumental. It's got tangible value, knowledge does. So you need people in order to grow the business. A lot of that's like high level. I think at the most tactical level at Outreach right now, the enablement team is tactically responsible for onboarding, for content curation, ongoing training, and optimizing the tools and the tech stack for the team.
Okay, great. I love how you actually share two versions of the definition because it, again, displays message has to be targeted to the person you're speaking to. So again, a great insight. Thank you for that. Cool. So let's get into our topic, discovery. I think in one of our first chats a couple of weeks ago, Whitney, when we first met and we spoke about discovery, you mentioned that for you, discovery is a never-ending story. It's not a one-stop show or a one-stop interview. It has to be a continuous process. What exactly is behind that for you? What do you want to share with us on that?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of standard sales processes have an early stage that's dedicated to discovery. And a lot of them even have a specific repeatable call that they call and label the discovery call. And so oftentimes what this misconstrues by putting it in a box like that so early in the sales process is that it's a point in time event. And when you're past that call or when you're past that stage, that no more discovery is required. And it inevitably creates a rep behavior where they find themselves asking questions like they're almost interviewing a prospect. And so that can be a really challenging part of the customer experience, because as a buyer, you won't feel like they're adding value early on. And so you might get disengaged. And if reps are too busy or too lazy, they may be asking questions that they could have really found independently through research.
Yep.
So I think that's enough on like the initial interview component. I told you that it never ends, right? And here's what I mean by that. With SaaS in particular, that call was likely scheduled by a business development rep who generated interest and lightly qualified the opportunity. And in today's world, buying's never done in a vacuum. So that one person who expressed interest, while they may become your internal champion, they're likely not going to have full purchasing authority. And so that means that you're going to need to multi-thread and reach out to multiple stakeholders at a business in order to understand those really unique perspectives and to drive consensus, right? Because if you've got groups, you have to be able to drive consensus in your company's favor. I mean, even in the enterprise space, like there's such long deal cycles, you can't just have discovery stop at the beginning of the process.
Yes.
I think finally, there's like a lot of different types of discovery that have to happen, and you can't jam that all into one call. So things like discovery on the value of your product to the business, around the use cases and internal processes that might be really important for configuring your product. Could even be the internal purchasing process at that company, because that's going to be what helps you with forecasting and generating some sort of confidence score about that deal. And so these responses will likely be different by the different people in the business. So latching onto a champion and hoping for the best, it just doesn't cut it anymore.
I hear you. And also what you mentioned, that it's a multi-threading process and you have to speak to various people throughout the overall buying process and buying cycle. So when we speak about that, Whitney, how can we actually keep a general curiosity level at a high level so we move everything forward, but not losing the customer's perspective?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's like a secret or a trick to this. I think it's really an attribute that you hire for when you hire your sales team. You want to hire a rep that is authentically curious, and that way it'll feel natural for them to ask follow-up questions and learn more. And it's not just stopping at that one-dimensional surface level conversation. If it isn't a skill that your reps have, there's ways to build it, but it takes muscle memory, which means it takes time. And so you'll have to practice really digging in deep. And I called it one-dimensional earlier. I think that what you would have to do is get practice going to a four-dimensional questions, where you've not only asked questions around the circumstances and explored those circumstances, but you understand the need and how it relates to that product. You understand the why behind it all, and you can quantify the impact that your solution will have to that prospect. So that takes a depth of questions, not just your surface level. I guess if I could, I would change like Glenn Ross's ABC always be closing, right? Like that feels like a thing of the past. Feels a little like pushy and inauthentic. If I had it my way, it would be like ABC always be curious, because yeah, that leads to the close. And you'll be able to make a tighter value proposition if you think that way, because it'll resonate with your prospect because you know what's important to them. And I think there are so many benefits to this approach, like naturally enhanced empathy or improving your communication, which ultimately leads to improving your relationship, enhancing awareness or increased knowledge of the customer. Because when it gets to the root of it, that's where the seller becomes the differentiator themselves. He or she with the most knowledge is going to have a better chance of winning.
Yes, definitely. So you mentioned various skills already in this answer now, besides curiosity, empathy, knowledge, being able to keep the customer first. Are there any other skills you see that we as salespeople or marketing, sales, everyone involved in the overall customer-facing process needs to bring with them already or develop through muscle training to still keep the customer first and not fall into the trap of me, because it should be the customer who we're speaking to. He should be the focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say meeting your customer where they're at, right? Like that's a tailored approach versus just steamrolling ahead with your own agenda. And then helping your customer or your prospect and challenging them to elevate themselves in that sense. And so you can come in, you can use insights to come in with a hypothesis that's based on your experience, because you're likely talking to hundreds of other people in similar situations. And you want to make sure you add value. So whether that's industry insights or articles or thought leadership or connections even to other customers or people that are in their role. I think that the most important part there is paying attention to the pain. So that listening skill, right? Paying attention to the pain, and then flexing to up-level personas. And here's what I mean by that. You've got a variety of levels within an organization, and they've got different vantage points. So think about your lower level, your individual contributor or, newer team manager. They're typically talking about, and you can recognize this when you're asking questions, they'll be talking about the past. And your mid-level employees that have a little bit more influence will be talking about the present. They'll be talking about today and how things are currently working, because that's what they're focused on. They probably have like quarter by quarter goals and OKRs that they're striving towards. But your higher level personas are talking about the future. So a really skilled sales rep is going to take that mid-level that's talking about today and ask them questions about the future. They may not know the answer, but you're challenging them to think like their boss, because that's what's going to be important to them when they have to sell it internally.
Okay, so you mentioned challenging various times now and challenging questions, and that actually leads me to my next question, because questioning is a crucial part of the discovery process. However, questions are not all created equal, and some questions can actually really hurt you and your impact and your credibility. So from your point of view and your experience, can you maybe paraphrase some of the questions which should maybe be not asked or avoided in order not to diminish yourself throughout the process?
Yeah, totally. Like a don't list, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think if some of the things that come to mind first are like avoid questions that you yourself can find on the internet, right? I think that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Do you
Yeah, exactly. Avoid the machine gun interrogation style that comes when you're only asking closed-ended questions. That feels like you could be filling out a form online versus needing to have that live interaction. I would say avoid focusing strictly on like feature qualification, which I think is a little bit harder for reps. You tend to ask a question in a certain way because you know that you've got a part of your product that solves that challenge. And so you're actually leading the witness. So what that does is it actually doesn't help you learn about the prospect, because you're pushing them to reveal information that you know you can solve. And I think the last one is don't settle for the high level answers. A lot of your prospects or customers will give you surface level responses to keep the conversation going. And that authentic curiosity we talked about will help here, but help your prospects to quantify pain. And that means drilling in deep to cost, risk, and revenue associations with the pain itself. And that can be really challenging, especially for less sophisticated buyers or less operational buyers, because they may not have easy access to that type of information. So helping them uncover it will actually add value to both you and them.
Are there any questioning techniques which you, on top of what you mentioned now, like active listening, for example, but are there any other techniques what you highly recommend, for example, when you're onboarding new salespeople?
I think when it comes to techniques, like discovery is often synonymous with asking great questions. And so that comes down to that 4-dimensional type of question that we talked about earlier, where you're drilling in past the surface level pain. It comes into balancing that mix of closed and open probes, because too many closed probes feels like an interrogation. Too many open probes feels like, too wishy-washy and they don't understand like where it's landing. And then the last thing would be really making sure that the questions are relevant to the buyer themselves and that they can understand that relation.
Great, thank you. So when we spin it back to the sales enablement aspect, how do you see discovery to die in to sales enablement at this early stage of customer engagement? And we already learned it's a never-ending story. So how can we, through sales enablement, actually support our sales reps and marketing in this process?
Yeah, I think not to put too much pressure or to give too much credit to enablement, but I think that we really build the foundation for strong discovery. I say this because we're the masters of onboarding and continuous skill development, right? So we're typically the ones who are talking about it first with the teams. Discovery and asking great questions, it's like batting practice though, and it requires us to get back to basics. So we're often responsible for introducing the methodology at an organization, and discovery is always a part of methodology rollout. And I think while enablement's important, it's really that continuous partnership with frontline leaders who coach to it day to day that's crucial for the reinforcement. I always joke, like, you've got to learn it with enablement, you've got to live it with the manager's coaching before you can love it and master the skill. There's that change curve there where it takes some time.
Wonderful. I love that you actually mentioned coaching, because that's such an essential part. You know, we learn so much in the training and enablement, but then we never apply it. And how should we know if we apply correctly if we don't get feedback? And through the coaching process, I think that's there where it's implemented well and brought to life, actually. Super.
Those frontline managers are so important to driving enablement initiatives as well.
Yes, yes. Super. Whitney, again, time is flying, 20 minutes already gone. Oh my God, it's incredible. So if we take a look at the last couple of months and weeks, the obvious happened, COVID, we can't deny it. What impact, from your point of view, does COVID have on the discovery and the overall process from the customer journey? And then also on the sales enablement. We don't praise sales enablement, as we learned already. However, it does have impact. So what's your point of view there?
Yeah, I think first, let me start by sharing my mantra, which is there is no playbook for a pandemic. Yeah. And as someone who is used to having a lot of the answers, this is something that I have to keep repeating to myself, because we're all figuring this out together. Mm-hmm. And so I think we all need to take a really big collective deep breath and lean into our peers, our mentors, and continuously share best practices of what we're finding that's working, because this is uncharted territory. Regarding discovery in this time, I think the authentic curiosity combined with empathy is going to go a long way. It's going to be uncomfortable for some folks who have, had the mentality of turning on that strictly business face when they reach the office. But when it comes to enabling teams during this time, I think there's another angle to this question, which is we have the complication of a forced remote environment. And I'm really lucky to work in tech. Our teams have been equipped with an extensive tech stack. And even with that, the transition has still been really tough in other ways. So teams seem to be really emotionally drained and exhausted from just the external environment. And so making change management happen is really difficult right now. And so leadership has a different vantage point, right? They're seeing less calls on the calendar and thinking, oh, this is the optimal time to add in a lot of enablement. And, it really is hard in general. And so it's important to recognize that we should slow down. I think that that's a big part of it. And being virtual makes it really challenging to read the room. So slowing down and having a multi-touch approach ourselves, something that's multimodal, meaning no longer can we just do the point in time training, we need to create a constant drip campaign of reinforcement and coaching and activities and collaborative workshops on a single topic before we move on to the next one, before we move on to the next initiative. I think those are really the lessons that I've learned so far through this crazy time.
Okay, super, thanks. One thing I just heard is the remote art of working right now. How do you think that applies also to the discovery where we have this co-active listening and we don't see our customer full body anymore? Like us, we see our upper body, but we don't know what else is happening. So what kind of implications does that have on the actual discovery for our salespeople? Are there any tips and tricks you can share with that?
Yeah, for us in particular, discovery's always been done like inside discovery, right? Inside sales. So a lot of it has been done over the phone or over video. So I'm lucky that it's not that big of a transition. But for folks that aren't used to using this technology, I think being able to see each other face to face like this is really helpful. The other challenge is before you get a big group on the phone, because a lot of this is no longer done one-on-one, it's important that you connect with those individuals offline. So that way you're able to understand the unique perspectives and tailor to your audience, because it's really challenging to read the room now when you've got multiple people on the phone.
Okay, cool. So Whitney, are you up for some questions?
Let's do it.
All right, let's see. Which signs tell me that I'm not focusing enough on the customer perspective, and how can I adjust my process there?
Okay. I think with this, if all of your Salesforce notes start to sound the same, then you're likely leading the witness and not allowing the customer to really share their true perspective on things. So I would say review your notes and action items. And if you're starting to recognize too many trends, check your own approach and make sure that you're opening up those questions to really hear their perspective. It's a habit, right? Like it's a habit that is very natural to start asking what you're comfortable with and to start driving towards what you want. And so it's a real skill to take that step back and listen to the unique responses and drill down into what's unique for that customer or that prospect. So I think that would be my approach there. But signs would be like, check your own notes and see if you find yourself going into repeat.
What if you notice that you're actually following your own agenda more than the customer's agenda? Would that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you would find, right? Like if your notes were repeating themselves, that would be the result of that.
Okay, next one. How can I accommodate people with different roles in my sales process? We touched on that before, but maybe we can go a little deeper on that one.
Yeah, sure. I think I'd say prior to any group discussion, again, you'll likely want to meet with folks individually. That will allow you to make direct call outs to people on the call, and there's value in it for you too. You will know their personal interests. You'll be prepped for common objections that you could receive. And so it'll be a stronger overall experience for the room. Because the financial persona versus the tech persona versus the HR persona, they're all going to have such different opinions. So that preparation is key. I think a tip would be, this is the appropriate time to lean into your internal champion. Ask them, what are some of those things that you can anticipate or expect? And then follow up and verify that with the individuals themselves. But they'll usually tell you like, here's the person that's going to be the toughest in the room. And like, so-and-so's really stuck on this line these days in meetings. So expect them to ask this question. Building that relationship is really, really helpful, especially when you start to move from these individual conversations to more of the group setting.
Okay, so leveraging the champion and building the relationship with them in order to gain some insights on how to further move on. Great.
Absolutely.
Super. Maybe one more. How can I turn discovery to solution or value co-creation with my potential customer? That's an interesting one, I think.
I really love that one because I think it's always inevitable that there will be some internal selling that happens when you're not around. So building that partnership is really important. So I'll get into like a discovery lesson, right? Which is you should understand what's the current state versus ideal state for your prospects. And within that, you have to understand what's the delta there? What's the difference between those two scenarios? And how do you quantify it? So using that type of framework, you're able to help them envision what this future could look like. And so that way they'll be able to better sell internally as well. I also think that's a really good point for marketing. We know that this is happening. So creating buyer's guides or ROI templates that sellers can use more downstream after they've done the actual discovery. I think those are really helpful tools that you can fill out together with your internal champion or potential customer to make sure that when you're not around, that they're still portraying the ultimate value of your product.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And thanks for answering those questions just out of the audience. So Whitney, time flies again. I would like to give you one more opportunity to also share with the audience some influences, getting some personal tips and tricks of books, podcasts, anything that inspired you in your life and had an impact. What comes to your mind here? What do you want to share with us?
Well, it's such a big question. I think for me personally, a major event that influenced me was getting my CPTD, which is Certified Professional in Talent Development. Mm-hmm. That was something that I felt helped me feel like a well-rounded enablement professional and enablement leader. And it gave me tried and true frameworks to follow, like the Addy model and Kirkpatrick model. I think another thing that comes to mind right now is I mentioned leaning into your mentors and learning from your peers. For me, that's huge, learning from the enablement community. I sort of started a pandemic passion project called Enablement Enthusiast. And part of my strategy was really interviewing other enablement leaders and asking them the same questions to understand the vastly diverse backgrounds that bring people into the field. And it's been fascinating to learn about how they define enablement, like you asked, and how their backgrounds influence the direction that they take their teams, and to hear about their proudest accomplishments. I think enablement's often the unsung hero at a company, and so it's been fun for me to shine a light on such incredible talent. So I've learned a lot through that too.
And it's actually a wonderful project. I love it. I check it out every week, most likely, and it's really great. Congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
So Whitney, if our participants want to get in touch with you directly, what's the best way to reach you? How do you want to be contacted?
Sure, thanks for asking. The best way is likely through connecting on LinkedIn. So shoot me a note, tell me what you learned in this session. And then alternative ways could include visiting enablemententhusiast.com or following along on Instagram at enablemententhusiast.
Okay, thank you so much. Whitney, thanks for joining today and sharing your insights with us. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Britta.
All right, everyone. I hope you also enjoyed the conversation with Whitney as much as I did. I'm already looking forward to our next talk next week on Thursday again, and I'm honored to welcome Amy Franco, the LinkedIn 2019 Top Sales Voice, a sales strategist and author. We will speak about offerings and presentations, and also how can we develop a standout proposal. We will also speak with her about the skills that qualify as a modern seller. So join in, have fun, and see you next week. Thank you.